behalf of the Great Falls Citizens Association, welcome to the second GFCA Town Hall webinar concerning the proposed amendment to the County Outdoor Lighting Ordinance. I'm Jennifer Falcone, and I chair the Land Use and Zoning Committee of the GFCA. While we were standing by, please allow the attendees to populate. We're going to give them a few minutes to join the call. I have several announcements to make. First, during tonight's webinar, attendees will be in listen and view mode. Questions may be submitted by typing into the Q&A box. We will track them and ensure all the panelists can address them. Following the Q&A segment, attendees may be recognized by raising their hand icon, and we will continue to open their microphones for questions and answers and comments. And now we will hear from my colleague, Winnie Frost. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Winnie Frost, and I'm co-chair along with Chris Rich of the GFCA Environment and Parks Committee. Tonight's webinar will focus on the proposed amendment to create a dark sky preserve around the observatory at Turner Farm Park. We will discuss the details of the current ordinance, in addition to what is being proposed and the state law that authorizes it. We also review the community survey sent out to the neighbors who are most affected, and finally discuss safety and security concerns, review the proposal process, give you some background why the dark sky ordinance amendment is being proposed for a half-mile radius around the observatory, and why a dark sky is important for the observatory to meet its goals for the community and park visitors. Our speakers tonight will include the Honorable John Faust of the Drainsville District, Tammy Schwab, Manager Education and Outreach for Fairfax County Park Authority, Dr. Jeffrey Kresh and Alumna Society, Carmen Bishop, Deputy Zoning Administrator, Fairfax County Zoning Administration Division, Dr. Peter Flapchan, Associate Professor, Physics and Astronomy, and Director of the Observatories at GMU, Katie Defoe, Master Police Officer, Crime Prevention Specialist, Fairfax County Police, and Bill Canis, President of the Great Falls Citizens Association. We begin with Bill Canis, who will explain how the Great Falls Citizens Association initiated an effort to create a dark sky preserve around the observatory at Turner Farm Park. Bill?
Thank you, Winnie. I hope everyone can hear me. The Great Falls Citizens Association has for 54 years worked with our elected officials and county and state officials on a range of issues that affect Great Falls. So we've seen over those many years concerted effort by residents who had a vision and appreciation for things that later generations have come to take advantage of, taken for granted. So 100 years ago, if I could say, Mark Turner, who was the dairy farmer who owned the dairy farm where Turner Park is now, led local residents to build the first ever community center in Great Falls, which we know as the Grange. This was done entirely with private funding and was somewhat of a daring enterprise back in the 1920s because there was no focal point in this community. But they created one, and 100 years later, we still benefit from that vision that they had. 40 years ago, the old schoolhouse, which is next door to the Grange, came up for sale. There was a real possibility that it would have become that corner would have become a strip mall. Residents of Great Falls organized and raised $100,000 and got the Park Authority to match it to prevent the old schoolhouse from being torn down and replaced with a parking lot and a strip mall. The residents had the vision and the commitment to make it work. And 25 years ago, the Turner Farm came up for sale. It could have been sold and become all of Turner Farm could have been a housing subdivision or something else. And instead, again, residents were engaged. They took concerted action, and ultimately working with the Park Authority and the Board of Supervisors created the first part of the Turner Farm. Great Falls would not be what it is today without a vision of what we should be as a community. This place would look far different had people sat on their hands and just let things take their normal course during the last 100 years. I'm proud that we have residents that are always willing to stand up and take a stab at making this a better place to live. But tonight I wanted to turn to the observatory at Turner Park because that is our topic tonight. And as I mentioned before, Mark Turner operated a dairy farm on the property from 1905 till about 1969. At that point, some of the property became the control center for a Nike missile site, with the Nike missiles actually stationed over where near Forestville School is now, as a part of our Cold War defense against Soviet attack on the nation's capital. But after 1993, that was no longer needed. And the question came up, what should the property be used for? Back in 1993, the Great Falls Citizens Association asked that question. We said, what should we do with this park? What should we do with this land? Could we turn it into a park? And eventually, by 1999, 6 years later, in fact, it was transferred to the Fairfax County Park Authority. I'd like to make a personal observation, which some of you may also have, that during this same time that the fate of Turner Farm hung in the balance, a similar parcel of farmland was also in transition in McLean. You may have all been familiar with Evans Farm and the Evans Farm Inn. It was a charming rural farm piece in downtown McLean, and many residents wanted to save the Evans Farm, but they didn't make it. But we in Great Falls did, due to a lot of perseverance, luck, and hard work by many people. The Turner Farm got set aside as parkland, and it was about this same time that the Analema Society was born in Great Falls in 1998, seeing the potential of the dark skies that are unique to our part of Fairfax County. The Analema Society was born and staffed by volunteers, and again, a wide range of residents who said, why couldn't we perhaps make that into a place where we could observe the skies and the stars and make a tremendous contribution by making it a Fairfax County facility. Eventually, they wrote a cooperative agreement in 2001, and in 2016, the roll top building that is there now was completed. It's called a roll top building because the top can be pulled back and a range of professional telescopes are available to look at the night sky. I would be deficient to also point out that the park also includes an equestrian facility, of which a number of investments have been made, and there are equestrian events there regularly. There's a small playground, and the Turner Farmhouse became a resident curatorship program under the Park Authority a few years ago. At one time, the motto for the park was horses by day and stars by night, which was somewhat of a charming definition of things that go on in that park. So the observatory is, in addition to the one at George Mason University, they are places where people can go and study and learn, both young people and old alike, about the world around us. And Jeff Kretsch can give a greater definition to that in a few minutes, but this is a tremendous accolade for our community to have such a beautiful facility that the Park Authority has invested in, and it is unique. But here's the vision part. In the next decade, we could lose much of that. If the skies here become like a Tyson's parking lot right around this facility, the ability to see the stars is going to be severely diminished. And not only Great Falls, but Fairfax County will have lost a tremendous asset. I mentioned the Turner Park and the observatory and the resident curatorship. These are all things that our supervisor, John Faust, has been instrumental in working on. In a minute, I wanted to introduce him. I think many of you already know Supervisor Faust. He was first elected in 2007, and he has 3 times been reelected to his position, most recently in 2019. Supervisor Faust chairs the Housing Committee for the Board of Supervisors, and he is also head of the county's Economic Development Commission. Locally, we all know many of the contributions that Supervisor Faust has provided. He was instrumental in coming about with the resources to widen Route 7, in building a new fire station in Great Falls, in getting the Turner Farm resident curatorship program not only part of the county, but also getting the Turner Farm selected for it here in Great Falls, and most recently, the Grange Foundation, which operates the Grange building. Supervisor Faust assisted with the Park Authority in arranging that license agreement between the Great Falls Grange Foundation and the Park Authority. It's ironic in a way that we talk about the Grange and Turner Farm. They form a sort of an axis in Great Falls. And Mark Turner, who lived on the Mark Turner farm, had a major hand in both institutions. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce John Faust and thank him for his strong many years of advocacy and hard work and problem solving for those of us that live in Great Falls. Supervisor Faust.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate very much, Bill, and thank you. I really appreciate your obvious passion for your community and the I would say unlimited number of hours you put in advancing the interests of the Great Falls community. So I think everybody on this call probably would like to express our appreciation for all you do. And with regard to the specific project we're here to discuss tonight, it goes back to 2020. In 2020, the Board of Supervisors revised the countywide lighting standards to better address the impacts of glare and light pollution throughout the county. As a follow-up to that effort, we, the board, directed staff to research and draft a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance that would create a dark sky preserve around astronomical facilities, which would apply to Turner Farm, something that we were authorized by the state legislature to do. So in March of 2022, just 6 months ago or so, we had a similar meeting to what we're having tonight, where the GFCA and my office sponsored a meeting to go over we covered the existing outdoor lighting regulations. We discussed some of the potential changes to help preserve and protect the dark skies within the 1/2 mile of the observatory. We were had outstanding representation and presentations, and Park Authority was there that night, the Analemma Society, the county's Department of Planning and Development that has been working very hard on this, try to get a draft that we can all consider. And the GFCA, of course, Rob Fenimore made a presentation. It was, I thought, so professionally well done, again, by a community volunteer organization, essentially. So my hat's off to the GFCA for really taking the lead on getting us to this point. We received a lot of feedback, which is predictable, of course, at a meeting like that. And a lot of it was in the form of questions that people understandably wanted to know: what was the impact on safety? What would the impact be on enforcement if it were, restrictions placed on lighting that don't currently exist? So following the meeting, there were postcards sent out to about 520 or so residences, given notice of a survey that the county was sponsoring and asking the community to participate in. And we got good feedback. So tonight, staff's going to address questions, concerns that have been raised. They'll review the results of the survey, and we'll go over the text of the draft amendment that has been prepared. And before we get any further down the line, I do want to thank the GFCA again for sponsoring this meeting. And I especially want to thank Winnie Frost for all her hard work on this, and Jennifer Falcone for all her hard work on this activity, as well as everything else that she does. Well done. I mean, I can't do my job representing the community without help, and I get the best help. GFCA, I am so grateful. So thank you. And I really look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Faust. Thank you. All right. And now I'd like to introduce our opening segment with Tammy and Jeff. Tammy Schwab is the Manager of Education and Outreach for the Resource Park in Fairfax County Park. Tammy has been working in natural and cultural resource education for over 22 years. Dr. Jeffrey Kresh is currently treasurer of the Analemma Society, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating the public in science through astronomy. The Analemma Society operates the observatory at Turner Farm Park. Jeffrey is a retired senior staff scientist from the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He holds a BA in astronomy from Northwestern University, a master's degree in physics, and a PhD from Purdue University. So I'm turning it over to Tammy and Jeff. Take it away.
Yeah. Yes, I'll start it off. What's shown on the screen right now is what you see when you walk in the sidewalk towards the observatory. And the first thing you'll see is the roll-top observatory and classroom, which will be on your left. And within the classroom, we teach class, have our presentations things. And on the left there, you see the roof, as Bill mentioned, it rolls to the right. And when it opens up, then you can actually, see the heavens. The telescopes are exposed. Behind it is the RADO. That's a remote access telescope observatory. Originally, we were going to use that, but it has, ADA compliance issues. So we're going to use it as a remote access telescope. And that's how we're going to integrate with the public with that one. And that's in development because I always get questions on that. And so we opened in 2016, but we've been doing this since 2003, which is why I can speak a little bit about how dark it once was. I think I can, let's go to the next slide then. So this gets to the heart of why we're there and what we do. Now, a lot of times when you think of amateur astronomers, you think of somebody on a hilltop or something, and they're just sort of to themselves, observing the sky. And there are some that do that, but that's not what happens here. Is you can see in all those pictures, we're interacting with the public. So all those children are actually learning something about astronomy. They're experiencing it direct, and the volunteers make that possible. And so as you see them, lined up there, we get quite a few. I mentioned like 7,500 visitors over the last 4 years. This year, I just did a count, and we have over 2,400 just from this year alone. And at that rate, we'll have 3,200. Just for this year. So we're building up for the people that we're meeting. So people come for the hands-on experience, and our volunteers make that possible. Like in the lower right-hand corner, that's Bill Burton teaching a class on a Mars rover, and the kids are very much involved in actually designing the path to one. And on the left, that represents our Friday night observing. We used to have them outdoors. We still have some outdoors, but in the middle is what we now have. See, with the roof rolled back, and you see the telescopes there. That's actually what most people come to see. It saves us a lot of time and setup and things like that. But kids get a direct experience as well as adults and the families. And so I think we can go to the next slide here. Now, this actually shows what the impact of light pollution is on us. So on the left is what I'd expect to see if we were in the country. You'd see all those stars around the constellation Orion, which many people know is a very bright one of the more bright ones. Unfortunately, on the right, that's a better idea of what it actually looks like at the park. We've lost all those stars. There's a lot of background light now. And so when we do things like astronomy merit badge, where they have to find constellations, we have large areas of blank sky that are just lit by light. And so we have a lot fewer stars to actually show people visually. When we have meteor showers, we don't see as many because the sky is so bright. And other activities are also impacted by the increased light. And if we go to the next slide here. So this, I'll just go down some of the objects we observe and how light pollution hurts us there. And of course, normally, like I've shown you what you can see with a naked eye binocular telescope, that's diminished by that. We've lost the Milky Way as well as the dimmer stars. So we used to be able to see that back 20 or so years ago. For the major planets, the planets themselves, we can get by. That doesn't hurt us too bad, but we can't see the dimmer moons. We can't see planets like Pluto. That's lost in that. And some of the dimmer comets and things that when they come around, we lose those. And star cluster nebulas, many of those objects are lost in the light polluted background, so we just can't see all the stars in them. Some objects we can't see at all, so we have to restrict our list. So that restricts the number of things we can actually show people. And so I think my final point is the observatory, it does serve as a major benefit to the community. As you can see from all the kids and families use it, which is a measure of value. So that's a thing to do here. So I've talked about what light pollution does to us directly. Now Tammy's going to talk about light pollution itself and its characteristics.
Thanks, Jeff. So basically, this is a representation of a scale that scientists use to measure how many stars you can see in different light polluted environments. And the Turner Farm falls between 5 and 6 probably on this scale, this suburban sky here. We do have an international dark sky park in Delaplane, Virginia, that has a designation as a dark sky park. Unfortunately, because we are in the 5 and 6 range, we wouldn't qualify to be an international dark sky park, though we are working on a different kind of designation. And one of the things that we want to sort of recognize about Great Falls is there are so few dark skies left in Fairfax County. This is a light pollution map of Fairfax County. You can see Fairfax here in the middle. The observatory is up here in this sort of darker area, but look at all this area in the whole, county that they can't see the amount of stars that you can see here. Like people are going to travel to see the dark skies here in Great Falls. So it's something to protect and be proud of. So we're going to try to be what's called an urban night sky place. So we've submitted an application to the International Dark Sky Association to recognize our efforts in light pollution education and being a sort of demonstration site for how lighting can work in urban environment. And one of the things that we're doing as part of our application is we're actually investing in the lighting at the observatory itself and making sure that we are fully compliant with dark sky friendly lighting. And so we've actually been working on the bollards there and changing the correlated color temperature there and making it more dark sky friendly and actually viewing friendly, a more amber sort of color. And so we're going to walk the walk to be able to get this application and to get our designation as an urban dark sky park. Part of that's being the best example of urban lighting that we can, but we're also increasing our education and outreach in support of dark skies countywide. So we're trying to increase awareness and action through the whole county. We have a brand new topic webpage for the Park Authority if you wanted to visit and learn more about dark skies and lighting to protect the night. The website is up here. You can easily Google it as well or visit the park topic page. We actually created with the partnership with the Girl Scouts of the nation's capital, a new Girl Scout dark sky patch. You can find a session in the Park Takes magazine online. You can also request this for your troops. So we're spreading this not only at the observatory, but other places. We have one of these patch programs coming up this Friday at Cobrun Rec Center. We also are going to be celebrating International Dark Sky Week. And of course, every Friday night, weather permitting, is our free viewing session. So we want people to come in and visit and see these dark skies that we're trying to protect. And just, sort of a final point, you can make a difference. Light pollution can be reversed, and it doesn't mean no lights, it means good lights. And that's what this is sort of showing. Like, if we can change our lights, we can change the sky. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy and Jeff. And now I'd like to introduce Carmen Bishop. Carmen Bishop is Deputy Zoning Administrator, and she was co-leader of the Zoning Ordinance Modernization Project and is the lead for this proposed zoning amendment effort.
Thank you. I'm going to my screen. All right. Can someone tell me if you're seeing my presentation?
Yes, we are.
All right, great. Thank you again. I'm Carmen Bishop in the Zoning Administration Division, and my presentation will focus on the zoning ordinance amendment. First, I'm going to provide some background on the proposed amendment, including the process for adoption of an amendment. And then I'm going to review the current regulations because it's important to consider any additional regulations in the context of those existing regulations that apply countywide. And I will touch on the community survey that was conducted this spring that Supervisor Faust mentioned, as well as the preliminary concepts for the proposed amendment. And there will be time for questions and discussion, but there are going to be a couple more speakers after me, but you can go ahead and I see a couple people have already. You can put your comments in the Q&A box as we go along. You think of them. So this amendment topic, it does stem from that follow-on mission that Supervisor Faust mentioned that was approved by the board as part of that 2020 zoning ordinance amendment that revised certain of the zoning regulations for outdoor lighting that apply countywide. And that motion did direct staff to consider additional zoning provisions to protect dark skies around astronomical facilities. And by that, we do mean the Turner Farm Observatory, because it really is the only observatory in the county that zoning regulations apply to. They don't apply to the observatory at George Mason. So while dark skies can have many health and environmental benefits, the purpose of any additional regulations as part of this amendment would be to protect the night sky for the observatory. So we are in the research and community outreach phase for this amendment. As Supervisor Faust mentioned, we did have a town hall back at the end of March. And if you participated in that, I want to apologize because some of my slides are the same, but I promise I do have some new materials, so hang in there. Now, for all zoning ordinance amendments, the steps include what's called authorization. And this is where the Board of Supervisors approves that we can schedule a public hearing before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And then none of those dates have been set at this point. There's no authorization date or public hearing scheduled at this point. Given our internal timeframe, I can tell you that it's not possible to have authorization before December 6th. And it hasn't been scheduled for that date, but I can just, I looked at the schedule and I can see that it couldn't be before that date. So that does tell you that public hearings could be at the soonest the beginning of 2023. So while we do live in an area of significant light pollution, as Tammy mentioned, this is a type of pollution that can be reversed. And the purpose, as I mentioned, of this amendment would be to minimize glare and overlighting to protect the observatory, because that sky glow, it does limit the effectiveness of the telescopes and the programs that take place there. So additional zoning regulations may be appropriate in this area. And the authority to enact these regulations is found in state code, which says that any locality can regulate outdoor lighting within an area of 1/2 mile around planetariums, observatories, and so forth. And so that 1/2 mile area you can see on the slide here and shaded in blue, it includes a total of 525 parcels, and they are all zoned to low density residential districts. So with that background, I'm going to move into a review of the current countywide regulations. And, they are detailed, but they do pertain to proposed regulations. So I'll try to kind of move through it somewhat quickly, but I'm going to focus on those for residential properties. There are other regulations that apply to non-residential properties. So first and foremost, all fixtures are required to be full cutoff and mounted horizontal to the ground. And full cutoff means that light is not emitted above the bottom of the fixture. And so sometimes I'll shortcut refer to those as dark sky compliant lights. The zoning ordinance also requires that your light bulbs have a maximum color temperature of 3000 K or less. And that K stands for Kelvin, which is the unit of measurement used for color temperature. And it does range from the warmer colors at the 3000 K and less to the bright blue white at the upper end of the range. Those lower color temperatures, they do result in, and they use less energy and they reduce glare. So that's an important regulation for this area. The zoning ordinance does require that if you spotlight a flag or a landscaping or architectural feature, that it be shielded and aimed to confine the light to the object intended. And then the zoning ordinance also requires for lots that are adjacent to residential. So it doesn't matter what the subject property is. If you're next to residential, then your lights need to have a setback that's based on their height. And it's based on a formula that's in the little box in the diagram at the bottom of the slide. So your height needs to be less than or equal to 3 plus the distance from the light to the lot line divided by 3. So as an example, if you could have a maximum mounting height, and this applies to both poles and building mounted lights, of about 9.5 feet with a 20-foot setback from your lot line. And I just picked in this example 20 feet because that's the minimum side setback in the R1 district. So let's say you wanted to mount your light higher than 9.5 feet. Maybe you want to put it under your eave on your house. Then you would need to have additional shielding to protect that adjacent residential. So this is an important regulation to prevent light trespass. And sometimes I refer to this as the setback or shielding requirement. The zoning ordinance does allow light poles 7 feet high or less to be located at any location in your front yard, in your front setback. That's allowed if they're up to 7 feet high. Now, also on all lights, on all lots, and this includes your single family lots, sports fields and courts, and this includes your backyard pool or your tennis court. If it's over 10,000 square feet in size, or you have light poles that are 20 feet high or more, they are required to have an approved sports illumination plan, and that carries with it additional requirements. So given all of that, it's important to note what is exempt from those requirements. And this is a bit of foreshadowing because this is the important part to the discussion of the proposed amendment text. So on lots with single family dwellings, lights are not required to be full cutoff or meet that setback or shielding requirement if the light fixture has 1,500 lumens or less, or if it's motion activated, it can have up to 4,000 lumens. It also needs to turn off within 5 minutes of your motion ceasing, and the light needs to be directed within the property. Holiday lighting is also exempt, and then depending on when the light was installed, it may be allowed to remain as it is until it is replaced. So between March 24th and April 24th, we did conduct a neighborhood survey. And this survey was intended for the people within the half a mile area that I showed on the slide before. And we sent a postcard to all of those residences. The postcard had a QR code and the website address for the online survey. And the online survey included information about the current regulations, as well as about the proposed amendment. And the survey, it was intended to inform the residents of the proposed amendment process, to provide information about the current regulation, and to solicit preliminary feedback. And you can find a summary of the results in the link says preliminary concepts document, and that is posted on our website. And if I can figure out how to put it in the Q&A box, I will add a link as well. Now, the survey, it did show that there is strong support for additional regulations to protect dark skies. And it also showed that there are certain concerns. Of those who do support additional regulations, many would support kind of ratcheting back on the exemptions, so to speak, to require most new lights to be full cutoff and exempt only a few, such as an entry light and motion activated light. There was also support for prohibiting certain types of lighting, such as landscape lighting or uplighting. As far as concerns, there were comments raised about safety and security. There were also questions raised about the benefit of additional regulations to protect a recreational observatory. And then there were requests to allow existing lights to remain that are already in place. So the draft text for discussion purposes is included in that preliminary concepts document that I mentioned and included the link on the previous slide. And I encourage everyone to check it out, read it, and contact me with any questions or comments. So in general, the proposed text, it would revise the exemptions from the requirements for lights to be full cutoff and meet the setback or shielding requirement. So instead of motion activated lights being exempt up to 4,000 lumens within this area, they would be exempt up to 1,500 lumens. And they would still need to meet the requirements for turning off within 5 minutes of motion ceasing and being directed within the property. And then for all other lights, instead of all lights up to 1,500 lumens being exempt, only one light that's located at each door or garage would be exempt up to 1,500 lumens. Driveway or walkway lights up to 10 lumens. And then the spotlighting of the flags or features that would still need to be shielded to be confined to the object, but there would also be a limit of 15 per lot. Now, it's important to note that this draft text, it does not include any limits on the either in terms of numbers of lights or lumens for lights that are full cutoff and meet the setback or shielding requirement. Now, with regard to allowing lawfully existing lighting to remain, previous zoning ordinance amendments for lighting have included what we might refer to as an indefinite grandfathering. So two options have been included in the draft text. One would have that indefinite grandfathering, and then the other would essentially set up a grace period so that all new lights would need to comply, and then existing lights could remain for a period of time. I've included 5 years in the draft for discussion. And so then after that 5 years, all lights would need to comply. And so this would support the purpose of the amendment while essentially allowing those existing investments to be amortized. So it's encouraging to note that there are options for dark sky compliant lighting available for purchase. Now, there are many fixtures and bulbs that do not comply with the zoning ordinance, but there are more and more options available. If you just Google up, dark sky lighting, I think you'll see a lot of different options that are available. So that's good to know. And then that does conclude my part of the presentation. Like I said, there's going to be a couple more presenters. So I am going to stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. We are pleased tonight to be joined by Dr. Peter Plavchen, Associate Professor of Physics and Astronomy at George Mason University and Director of the George Mason University Observatories. Dr. Plavchen earned his undergraduate degree in physics at Caltech in 2021, his PhD from UCLA in 2006, and he has held appointments with the NASA Exoplanet Science Institute at Caltech, Missouri State University, and is a visiting appointment at the University of Pennsylvania. And I think I may have said 2021. So physics at Caltech in 2001.
Hi, thank you, everyone. It's great to see everyone tonight. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, so I'm dealing with a cold today, and so I've saved up my voice today just for this. So it's not COVID, thankfully. So as mentioned, I am a professor at George Mason University, a sister. We have our own observatory here on campus, a sister observatory to Turner Farm, and I wish we could have as much protection of the night sky as we have or could have around Turner Farm. Unfortunately, on our campus, we're fairly restricted by state building codes, but we're working on it, and we do have a lot of light pollution on our campus. So I know you can follow me on Twitter at PlavchanPeter or email me at pplavcha, it's missing the N, at gmu.edu. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the physics of light pollution. In order to do that, we need to talk a little bit about light. Light sources emit energy, and so usually in consumer terms, what we're talking about there is lumens. Each photon that carries electromagnetic energy, the amount of energy that it carries is related to color, wavelength, or frequency. And a range of these frequencies and energies we call the electromagnetic spectrum, of which only a small portion is visible to the human eye. What we know is visible light from red to violet. Different light sources can produce different colors of the rainbow or spectra. This is a plot showing on the horizontal axis wavelength, or you can think of it as color. And then the vertical axis, the intensity. And so the sun puts out light at all wavelengths, but you can have, say, a tungsten lamp, which puts out primarily redder wavelengths, or say a white LED, or even a mercury vapor lamp, which will put out more green and violet colors. And so when you see these consumer products, what they're tuning here, the temperature, as they're referring to it, is a relative balance of red light to yellow light to green light to blue light to violet light. And this is actually important for light pollution, as we'll get to in a second. So some of the physics of light is that light spreads out. As photons travel outward from a light source in all directions in straight lines, the light spreads out with distance. And thanks to the conservation of energy in nature, since photons carry energy, how this light spreads out in area obeys an exact mathematical formula. And it's called the inverse square law of light. Specifically, for those of you interested, intensity of the light falls off as 1 over the distance squared, as shown in this little illustration here. And this is also important to light pollution, as we'll get to in a minute. The second key thing about light pollution is that the sky is blue. Everybody knows this, maybe not everyone knows why. The sky is not blue because of the Earth's oceans, but because of an effect of physics called Rayleigh scattering and how light interacts with particles in the Earth's atmosphere. Rayleigh scattering, as it turns out, is very color dependent. Violet and blue light get scattered much more than red light. So if you have the sun's incoming rays in space, and from space the sun actually looks white, the blue and violet colors will get kind of scattered away by the gas in the Earth's atmosphere and sent all around the Earth's atmosphere. And eventually some of that makes it back to our eyes down on the ground. So the sun is missing that blue and violet light, so it looks yellow during the middle of the day. And then we see that scattered blue and violet light giving the sky its blue color. This is also the reason why the sun appears red at sunset and why sunsets are so beautiful. As the sun sets towards the horizon, we're looking at it through more of the Earth's atmosphere. So not only is the blue and violet light getting picked off by the atoms in the Earth's atmosphere, but then some of the green light as well, leaving behind the reddish and orangish colors, giving us these beautiful sunset colors. So what does this have to do with light pollution? The Earth's atmosphere still scatters light at nighttime too, and preferentially bluer light. Or what we might call in consumer products, hotter bulbs. Light from hotter bulbs that emit more blue light than red light. So instead of scattering sunlight like the atmosphere does during the daytime, it scatters light emitted from the ground and moonlight and starlight. And so improperly shielded light fixtures and light reflected off of the ground goes up into the Earth's atmosphere and some of that gets scattered back down like dim, ongoing, continuous fireworks. So even in the absence of light pollution and the moon, the night sky is still not perfectly dark and has a brightness that the eye cannot discern. So this means three things for light pollution. First, bluer or hotter bulbs are worse for light pollution because they end up scattering more light into the Earth's atmosphere. And so redder or cooler bulbs are better. This is why if you've ever been to an observatory, you often see astronomers, one of the reasons why you often see astronomers using red flashlights and red lights. Also, it's better for the dark adaptation of your eyes. Second, because light spreads out, closer light sources at the same intensity produce more light pollution at a given location than sources further away. As illustrated here in this diagram, if we triple the distance to a light emitting source that is the same as a light emitting source that's a lot closer, it'll produce only 1/9 of the intensity of the amount of light pollution compared to the closer source, despite them being two identical sources of light pollution. So as another example, a single 100-watt light bulb at half a mile away produces just as much light pollution as approximately 200 identical 100-watt light bulbs that are 7 miles away. This follows from the inverse square of law of light, just to show you the math in detail there. It just comes from 14 squared. So some of you may be asking, why a half a mile? Why my neighborhood? What about some of the further away sources that are big sources of light pollution? And we call these urban light pollution domes. Light pollution is directional. The glow of distant cities can be seen in dark sky locations on the horizon as domes of scattered light, as shown here for the distant lights from, I believe this is, it's in New Mexico. I'm trying to remember exactly which city it is, Albuquerque. So inside the light dome, the light pollution is in all directions. But fortunately at Turner Park, we're away from some of these bigger sources of light pollution, such as DC and Tysons and Reston. And you already saw this slide about how light pollution, when you're inside the source of the light pollution, can impact your view of the night sky. But you can get away from it. So as a test of how polluted your skies already are, did you know that the number of satellites in orbit has doubled in the last 2 years? You can see them after sunset and before sunrise, reflecting sunlight with your eyes. You don't need a telescope. You don't need binoculars. They will, in fact, soon outnumber the stars you can see in the sky, even in dark sky locations, changing humanity's view of the sky potentially forever. And so if you're not aware that these things are happening right above your heads, try to look up and think about how your view is already being polluted from the light pollution we already have in the region. So while Reston, Tysons, and DC are major sources of light pollution at Turner Farm, they're also distant. And so as an example, one 100-watt light bulb shielded or eliminated within half a mile of Turner Farm is worth more than 100 identical bulbs in Reston and more than 250 bulbs in Tyson in light pollution intensity. Yes, there is a lot of light pollution emanating from Tysons and Reston, but they are also more distant. And because light spreads out, it's actually advantageous to first address the light pollution sources in your own backyard. With that, I'll turn it back over to our hosts.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much. This is Chris Rich at GFCA. Thank you, Professor Palvan, for that really interesting presentation. We have one more presenter this evening before we go to Q&A, and I want to introduce to you all Master Police Officer and Crime Prevention Expert, Katie Defoe. Now, this is a significant part of our presentation. We heard from several residents in our community that crime and, safety in the evening is an important part of what we need to consider with this amendment. And so we're very happy to have Katie Defoe with us. She is been with the Fairfax County Police Department since 2003. She's working with the county's crime prevention unit in Reston for the last 16 years. So she knows the ins and outs of our community relations. Always happy to talk to us. Katie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hello.
And I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do have a helper, if you can all see my helper. So I want to tell you that I'm going to share my screen and we'll start talking about lights. And I'm actually going to go backwards so that we can maybe make some sense of what we're talking about when it comes to lights. So I am a crime prevention specialist, which means that I have extensive training in all things crime prevention, and lighting does fit into that category. I'm also the subject matter expert for SEPTED for the county, and SEPTED is my next. There we go. Hold on, we'll go that one. We'll go back. So crime prevention through environmental design is a multidisciplinary approach, and the cool thing about that is that's exactly what we're doing here. crime prevention is not a one-sided thing. I know that there were concerns about reducing crime or, having a exemption and having lights on a specific thing. Well, the good thing about that is that this is SEPTED takes you all the way around all of your things. Lighting is not the only answer to home security and safety, because you have to put a lot of those things into play. Natural surveillance, which is what we're talking about, light, territorial reinforcement, which is a pride in ownership, and natural access control. And we're talking about that with the lighting a little bit, because you are guiding people in where they should be, and that dark part is saying where you shouldn't be. So no two properties are the same. And everyone's needs change as property use changes. So now we have, we're looking in that half mile, but what happens if you're a half mile and 43 feet? How much does the lighting change? So we're actually going to talk about, I'm going to talk about how to do the lights, how to use lights for safety, not just because we want to have lights. Because what I know and what we talk about frequently in crime prevention is, if you light it, they will come. Well, that's a good thing. But if you don't want people to come, then if you light it, they will come. So lighting is not the only answer, but it certainly is a way to enhance the safety and security around your house. All right, so let's I know that we've talked about light pollution, but there are 4 pieces of light pollution that go with lighting and lighting for safety. Glare, which is excessive brightness. We've talked about that. Sky glow. That's that picture they showed of New Mexico. Light trespass, which is light that extends past where it should be. And then clutter, which is the bright, confusing, excessive grouping, kind of like my spotlight picture over here. But over lighting is not security lighting. The brighter you make it does not make it safer in the long run. In fact, it actually causes that glare, which makes it even less of a security measure and more of a hindrance. So we've talked a lot about kelvins, lumens, and watt. So the language of lighting, and I talk a lot about this with individual homeowners when we're talking about what those lights should be. Kelvin is the scale of color, the color of light. Lumens is the measure of light's brightness, and watts is the light's consumption of energy. So when we're talking about the language of lights, and what we're talking about here is kelvins and lumens and watts. And here's the breakdown. So here are our standard lights, everywhere from the incandescent to the LED. So there's your breakdown of lumens, watts, and then how long they last when it comes to rated life. I do know that, incandescent bulbs are the old school and LED is the new school, and there's lots of things in between. But what we know is LEDs use less watts. They have a less watt to lumen ratio. So you can choose whatever kind of light that you want to use. But I want to give you the piece of how long they last versus the output and input of money out of your pocket versus the light that it's actually going to extend. And then I know you've seen this before, but that color temperature comparison. So Carmen said that the ratio or the county ordinance is at that 2,500 or 25,000 lumen temperature. So you can see on the thing I've circled where that would be in the lighting. And I know that the exemption is one step kind of down, but that's what the lighting would look like in either the current ordinance or the exemption. So they talked about the blue, Peter just talked about the blue light and how it's the reflection of it. So this is what we're looking at when we talk about color temperature. And it's a pretty simple thing to look at your lights and see where it kind of falls on this spectrum. It's a simple, what color light does it emit? And then how does this apply to lighting for security? At night, surveillance depends on light. If there isn't any light, then do we have any surveillance? And the answer is kind of goes with every property. There could be. But if you have lights on the inside and no lights on the outside, it's very hard to see out. So you're looking for kind of that balance. And I will tell you, these are actually, as to not pick someone's house, these are actually Great Falls real estate ads for the housing that is for sale in Great Falls. So these are actual light and pictures taken. However, I want to give you a word of caution for taking pictures of light. Digital cameras see light differently than the old film cameras. They see white. And so you'll see that that digital camera pictures look brighter than they actually were. to the naked eye because the camera sees the white light. So surveillance at night depends on lights. However, not all lights and situations are created equal. So we did talk about landscaping lights and the lights that go up. Where do they end? Well, they end where you can, in the sky. There are ways to take that landscaping light and take it from the top down. And there are also ways to, there are timers, there are motion sensors. But again, all lighting situations are not created equal. So lighting also enhances your personal safety. The third leading cause, for the first time in history, the third leading cause of death is accidental injury. What are we talking about? We're talking about people who can't see where they're going and something happened. The picture on the left is a picture of down lighting, not up lighting. So you still have that measured path. However, you're not pushing that light directly up into the sky. Driveways, backyards, pathways, steps, porches, they have a different use for safety. If you are not expecting anyone, then how close do you want them to get before you recognize someone is there? And that's where different safety and security measures come in, not just lighting. So yes, you can see if they're lighting, but what if we have something of a motion detecting alarm that says someone has entered the driveway? Then we don't have a light that we can't necessarily see. We have an alarm that tells us someone has come onto the property. So lighting is just one piece of the puzzle. They only work if you turn them on. And I know that someone might giggle at that. However, just the same as car locks only work if you've locked the car. It depends on us. It depends on the human factor. So if you have them, turn them on, and now you have those keys to look at, those tools to look at, what color is that light? Is it a full cutoff fixture? Motion detecting lights are fantastic. However, Great Falls is a lot of wooded. So we know that wildlife sets off those alarms. And what happens is kind of like the Boy Who Cried Wolf. The first four were, oh, yep, I can see the deer. It looks fantastic. And the fifth one isn't a deer, but we don't look because we know that the animal set off the alarm. And it's that bit of complacency that has to do with, oh, it always goes off because the deer are walking through the backyard. It makes it pointless to have that motion detecting light on at all because you're not noticing when that movement is happening. Lighting doesn't solve all of our problems. Like I said, if you have a long driveway, lighting the driveway, if someone's already really, really close before we have any indication someone has entered the property. So there are other things that can help boost the safety and security of your property, not just light. And the number one question to ask when putting up lights is, what do you want to see? We want to see pretty trees, sure, but what do we want to see for safety? And that is, if someone's standing outside my window, or if I open my front door, I can see that I can walk out of my house and there's not someone standing there. You're looking at those access points to your house, your garage, your back door, your front door, and kind of the path to and from your driveway so that you can get where you're going safely. And then lights, Light to protect the night, 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. I will tell you that I have actually given this presentation to Jennifer, and she will be able to push that out to everyone so no one has to take feverish notes. So are they useful? Are they targeted? The lowest light possible, controlled, and the color. Again, the warmer colors lights where possible, because we know that the wavelengths makes things, blue versus red. And then magically, not all lighting is created equal. And here's what we were talking about. You can talk about those kind of light fixtures, and we all know where all of these are located somewhere. From the globe that is a 360 down to that full cutoff that puts the light directly where the light should be. So full cutoff, what does that mean? The cutoff is a 90-degree angle or a 60-degree angle, but the light goes, only extends to where it should, not the whole globe effect that there's a 360 degree of light, because it's not needed. We don't need to light the sky to be able to see the sidewalk. And in fact, in a no cutoff fixture, you actually have less light where you need it, because it's illuminating things that don't need to be illuminated. So fixtures do matter. And I know that Carmen talked about that. There are absolutely night sky, dark sky approved fixtures, but what you're looking for, no exposed bulb, and the light is directed down and cut off at the fixture so it doesn't extend past that fixture. So here is kind of the example of this. Here's the exposed bulb versus the flush mount. LED has come a long way when it comes to that flush mount, because they have a way to the LEDs are set back in the fixture and still give the light where it needed to be without that without the exposed bulb, and again that kind of glare of the bulb where the light doesn't need to be. And I know that's kind of the down and dirty. I also did include kind of a light checklist from the Dark Sky Society that kind of gives you a way to check your light of what you have and what it's what type of fixture, the color, the kind of bulb, kind of a checklist for you to run down to make sure that your lights are working how you want them to, and you can see what you need to see for safety. And that, I think, is the down and dirty.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Jennifer, I'm going to hand back to you now for Q&A, please.
Thank you, Chris. And as soon as we're going to stop sharing there. Thank you very much. Before I start with the Q&A, we have many questions in the Q&A box. But before I start with that, I wanted to let everyone know that I and several members of the GFCA took a brief ride on several occasions through the areas that are affected by the 1/2 mile radius that this proposed ordinance will affect. And we have to say, all of us were quite impressed with the lighting in these neighborhoods. Not saying that every home was dark, but when they were lit, for the most part, it was impressive that they were compliant at first glance. And through this program, we just hope that a lot of people will realize the benefits to the observatory, and from here we'll see improvements. So that being said, high marks to the neighborhoods surrounding the observatory at this time. And we will start off with question number 1. If my porch light is not a down light, not shielded, but my 2 light bulbs are amber and 400 lumens total, am I compliant with the proposed ordinance? Carmen.
All right. So let's see. 2 light bulbs. So if it's a one fixture, the way the draft is written, with 2 bulbs in it, then it would be compliant. If it was 2 separate fixtures, the way the draft was written, one of them would be compliant and one of them would not be.
Thank you, Carmen. Okay, next comment or question is, I am all for preservation of dark sky. I'm not sure if you have the reference to this light pollution map. I hope to create a dark dot in this bright area through this effort. We can show that momentarily. Let's see. No, we're not going to. Oh, maybe. I don't think so. I think that this is very similar to what we saw with the other light. So the other map. So we're going to skip that for right now. How do we get more information to the surrounding neighborhoods? How do we educate the new communities going in along Georgetown Pike? For example, the Toll Brothers project and the project close to Turner Farm. I think that would probably, education would go to Tammy.
Sorry, I was actually looking at the question about how parks increase property values. But as far as education goes, yeah. So feel free to make a request to the Park Authority, because we're happy to actually come and speak to homeowners association. But this really is something that we're required to do for our new IDA piece. So we will be doing dark sky parties. We'll increase education for every visitor that comes to the observatory, but we'll also be doing things, especially during International Dark Sky Week and April countywide. But as far as Great Falls goes, the observatory really is the center of what's going on with our dark sky education. And so you should be seeing, brochures, presentations, different things going on at the observatory as we sort of ramp up our dark sky education and get our designation that we're hoping for in the next year or so.
Thank you, Tammy. Katie, would you like to weigh in on your educational opportunities as well?
Hold on. All right, there we go. So I'm actually in the final processes of making the crime prevention unit making a video of a home security check, a self-check for you to for every homeowner to kind of run through their security. We are always available to come out and look at every individual, the individual security of a property, just because it is so different. We do offer home security surveys at no cost to come out and look at, like I said, because everything's so unique and I wish it was cookie cutter. It would be slightly easier. But everybody can answer the questions differently. So we are working on a video to push out with a handout that does have the checklist of the things that we go through in the video. And I'm hoping that is pushed out by the end of this week, so that everybody will have that opportunity. We do a lot of things with commercial properties and businesses, houses of worship with lighting. And I think if the interest is there, we can certainly put something together for that residential, the residential aspect of lighting, with Carmen, if she'll if she'll spare some time, because it is important for people to understand what it means in that lighting, the lighting ordinance, and what exactly it means and how it affects or doesn't affect the security of your property.
Thank you, Katie. And just for everyone's benefit, we will post this video and all of the materials on our website, and in addition, if anyone would like me to email all of the presentations and paperwork to them, I can certainly do that as well. You just have to email zoning@gfca.org, and Winnie and Chris and I will work together to get all the information out. We do have information available at the present time, and we're happy to give
I
it.
think we have a question from a panelist. Did it come from Bill Canis? Bill, go ahead with your question.
No, go ahead and please take the other questions in order.
Okay, we'll come back to Bill Canis in a few minutes. Let's see, what does it mean to shield light on a flag? Carmen?
The zoning ordinance actually does have an illustration. I don't know if maybe Jennifer can help me figure this out, if I'm able to put some links into the Q&A that people would be able to see afterward, but I'm looking at it in the zoning ordinance. Figure 5109.3 shows an example of a directionally shielded fixture. So instead of having, your bare floodlight aimed up at the sky at your flag, for instance, you can have opaque shields around that light that are going to make sure that the light is focused on the flag, or sometimes people eliminate an architectural feature or a special landscaping feature. And so I hope that helps. And if I can figure out these links, I will add them. And otherwise, the zoning ordinance is available online, and it's in section 5109.
Thank you, Carmen. And just to clarify, unfortunately, panelists can't write into the Q&A. So we will figure out a way to get those links to the individuals that are asking these questions as easily as possible. Next question. The first speaker said tongue in cheek that our home values have gone up because of the observatory. Please prove the accuracy of that statement. In fact, discussions with neighbors within and beyond the half-mile radius are not happy and believe that it reduces home values. And I think that the first speaker.
I think that was in Jeff. I think that was in your presentation.
Was that in your presentation, Jeff? If so, if you would like
Or anyone else wants to jump in.
Make a comment, or anyone else on the board. But again, we can certainly look into that and see. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll make a little bit yeah, I don't know if I'm not a real estate person, so I don't think there's like a mathematical equation that you can plug it in. And I'm not sure that a lot of people do a mathematical thing and do a checklist. I imagine a few do. I think it's just one of these ideas that when you're thinking of where you're going to buy or something like that, you look at different things and they often swing your decision, and that ends up affecting it. Now, can I say it raises it by $50 or $5,000? Probably nobody can. But the fact that we invest in all these things, from parks and things, means that it must matter to some degree. And so I don't know whether you could say that prices are going to go down or up necessarily, but you can believe that, but I don't know. I don't have the power to do that analysis to say that, but I do know that.
Jeff, there has been studies, lots and lots of them, about, what influences a home's value. And there was a study that looked at 16,400 home sales within 1,500 feet of public parks in Oregon. And they found that depending on the type of park, it actually changed the home value, increased it by 8 to 20%. So depending on the type of park. So natural area parks, raise it more than say an urban park, but a specialty park is somewhere in between. So a lot of studies, depending on the type of park and the place where you are, they haven't set a value on how much it does increase it, but most real estate sites and most park sites have done the research, say it's somewhere between 8 and 20%. I think it's probably in this case more like 10%, but it is documented. Lots of surveys and studies have looked at home values within close distance of park.
Yeah, perhaps the person who asked the question would like to have the reference to that. It might satisfy his question.
Thank you very much. And additionally, 2 members of the Land Use and Zoning Committee that have experience in both real estate and appraisals could not attend tonight. So I will reach out to them to get a little bit of a basis for that as well. And moving on. So if we were to follow these guidelines in this half-mile area, how much would this affect the ability to see the sky as expressed in the rating system you showed below? Is it substantial or just somewhat better? And I'm thinking that both Peter and Jeffrey might have an opinion on that. Peter?
So the answer is really it depends, because it depends on whether or not the community participates. And it also depends on how long it's been since the ordinance went into effect. Because naturally, I'm pretty sure this is the case, that fixtures that are already in place are already grandfathered in, so to speak, and won't be required to change until they get replaced. Is that correct?
Carmen, go ahead.
So the draft text does include 2 different options for that sort of allowing lawfully existing fixtures to remain.
So to answer that question, it really does depend on how long it takes for change to take place. But if you do remove enough upward facing light sources, like we're not asking people to remove light bulbs altogether. We're just asking them not to point light upwards. And that's where the light pollution is coming. So you could still have the same, if not more, light directed towards the ground, illuminating the places you want to see illuminated. And it'll have a big impact on what we see in the night sky. And generally, as I said, one bulb within a half-mile radius could have as much impact as more than 200 bulbs 7 miles away.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to move on, Jeffrey, for the time being, because we have a lot of questions left. So please define, depending on when your light was installed, phrase in the exception to the ordinance. Go ahead, Carmen.
So that was just in my presentation trying to be brief about what's a little bit more wordy in the zoning ordinance, but in subsection 5109.1 B, it details out the grandfathering provisions for existing lights. So there's 2 different dates in there because most of the zoning ordinance outdoor lighting provisions were substantially changed in 2003. So there are some types of lights that were lawfully existing that may still exist from before 2003, and those are allowed to remain. And then there were additional changes that went into effect on February 12th, 2020. And so then there's some other provisions relating to that. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into more detail about that right now, but if you have specific questions about lights that you have installed and you want to know if you can keep them, please feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to help you with that.
Thank you, Carmen. And I think you're up for a few minutes here. I'm going to combine several questions here. It says, what about hanging string lights? Can houses have accent lighting shining on them? I can't imagine what it means to shield upward lights. Do trees count as shielding from accent lights shining on them already? And then why don't we do that? And then we'll come back to the 3 fixtures.
Yeah, so those are great questions. We've received the question about string lights before. And so we have interpreted that a single string counts as a fixture. So a lot of those string lights actually have very low lumens, so they might be exempt. And let's see, can houses have accent lighting shining on them? Yes, they can. The zoning ordinance allows that spotlighting of a particular feature, but it does need to be shielded. And then as far as what it means to shield, as I mentioned, it might have those opaque panels that kind of direct the light. So it's not just going up and everywhere, but only onto the object that you're trying to accent. Oh, the trees. Trees do not count. It would need to be like some sort of actual shield on the light. And there's actually an illustration of a shield, as I mentioned before about the 5109.3, but also if you look in figure 5109.4, it shows what it means to provide this house side shielding for that requirement.
Thank you, Carmen. If I have 3 light fixtures because there is a flight of stairs at my front door and none are dark sky, but the total lumens across 3 fixtures is 1,200 lumens of amber light bulbs, do I comply? Carmen.
All right. So you have 3 different. And under the current ordinance, I'll say it's an easier answer that yes, because 1,500 lumens is the exemption. Now, when you say you have a flight of stairs at your front door, the current draft text does provide for this area that it would just be 1 exempt fixture. So if you had 3, then one of them would be exempt, but the other 2 would not. So, yeah.
Thank you. Is this happening whether residents want it to happen to them or not? Or does the community have a way to stop this? I think that's a process comment that maybe both Carmen and Supervisor Faust would like to comment on.
I mean, this is like any other proposal that would come before the board. There's a lot of community outreach during the process. Typically, revisions, changes made, try to accommodate issues that maybe weren't obvious when we started the drafting, but ultimately it comes down to 2 public hearings, one for the Planning Commission where everyone will be given an opportunity to present their case, try to convince the Planning Commission with respect to how they recommend the board act, and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors. So there's nothing decided in advance. Everything is based on the process, and hopefully everybody will have an opportunity to participate in the process. That's why these meetings are so, this is kind of above and beyond what I normally get as input. And that's why I really appreciate what's going on here. Nothing's been decided.
Thank you, Supervisor Faust. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here, but I just wanted to let people know that if you have your hand raised, we will get to you after we have answered all of these questions. Why in the amendment is only 1 light less than or equal to 1,500 lumens allowed at the garage, since most garages have 2 lights, 1 on either side of the door? Potential for change to have 2 lights. Safety concerns prevail for personnel coming close to the garage that downward lighting may not be adequate. And then the next question, requiring residents to change their lighting seems like a form of taking property. Will the county provide recompense to homeowners so that they can comply with lighting requirements? So if anyone would like to take a stab at that, Carmen?
Sure. On the first one, that's a good suggestion. That's something that certainly could be considered to exempt 2 lights. To be honest, the suggestion to exempt only 1. One thing that we consider always in drafting zoning ordinance regulations is ease of enforcement. The zoning ordinance is enforced on a complaint basis. And if you have a concern, you can contact the Department of Code Compliance and they'll go out and investigate. Is it easier for them to, just tell that, oh, there's 1, that's not full cutoff, check, all the others are not allowed? That is easier than checking the lumens on both of the lights and what do they add up to. It's not impossible. So it's a good suggestion, but I'll just offer that bit of background as to why 1 might be easier than more than 1. But I definitely hear you there. And then the question about taking, I understand that the draft text does include the provisions for what we sometimes refer to as grandfathering. I'll note that it's actually not required. It is perfectly legal if the county wanted to enact regulations and say that they all are applicable to your properties tomorrow, that can be done. But that's not typically how it's done. We do usually recommend provisions that allow for those lawfully existing fixtures to remain.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm going to skip one here and go to how many people providing presentations this evening live in, live in the 1/2 mile zone of residents who will be affected. I can answer that question myself. No one who is a presenter lives in the 1/2 mile zone. Other than myself and Winnie, we're not really presenters with actual PowerPoints or whatever, but we are residents of this particular 1/2 mile area. Why not have the Analemma Society and others use areas in Great Falls, such as around Riverbend, which are extremely dark? They can easily set up telescopes. Obviously, the answer to that is they are free to take their telescopes wherever they would like, but the observatory is at Turner Farm Park. With the majority of residents against this ordinance, have you considered moving the observatory to another location, for example, Lake Fairfax or further away? I'm just going to make a comment here that I don't know that there's a majority of residents in that 1/2 mile radius. I don't think the statistics spoke to a majority there. I think it was pretty equal. If you'd like to go back to that, Carmen, and make a comment about your statistics there. And I think that we should maybe take a look at how many responses as well. So statistics here are not really, I can't recall exactly what you said. Thank you.
Sure. So I do want to say, I think the survey that was done in the spring was useful for the purpose of informing, as I said, people about the amendment process. Part of that education effort that we spoke about before, that, how are you letting people know? Well, it was part education, trying to tell people about the current regulation as well, and to gauge some preliminary feedback. But the outreach effort isn't done, so it's continuing. And I don't think that I would represent that survey tells us exactly what everyone thinks. It was tell us some preliminary feedback. Now, as far as responses, there were 521 postcards mailed, 521 lots. So we didn't include, sorry, Tammy, we did not send anything to the Park Authority, but everyone else got a postcard, and we received, I think it was about 182 or so responses. Now, some of those responses we could see came from maybe 2 responses from the same house. So it was just over 30% of the properties of those 521 that responded to the survey. And that's, it may sound sad, but it's actually pretty typical for a survey response rate. So that's what I can tell you. And as far as the responses on that, it was pretty equal. It showed that 50% were expressed concern about the additional regulations. 41% said yes, they would support additional regulations, and 9% said that they weren't sure. But like I said, I don't think you can infer that tells you that's what people have decided, and it's certainly only a fraction responded.
Thank you, Carmen. We bought our house 43 years ago. A few years ago, we purchased 4 non-tarnishing brass lights that cost a fortune for our entryways. Who will reimburse us if Fairfax County forces us to replace these fixtures? Then we have another comment about, is Fairfax County using eminent domain to force compliance? And another comment, while the professor is psyched, many of us do not care about astronomy. Should we move 1/2 mile further away not to deal with this stuff? Any comment about the lighting? Anyone on Supervisor Faust? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the one thing I know for absolute certain is that eminent domain would not be a remedy in terms of enforcement of the zoning ordinance. If you're going to be totally academic about what the possible enforcement remedies would be, it'd probably be a fine of some sort for failure to comply. But Fairfax County goes out of its way not to impose fines if at all possible. We try to get compliance, work with people. Try to act as a community rather than as one interest versus another interest. So it works out. We will figure out a way to make it work and not be draconian. I am quite.
Thank you, Supervisor. How much impact do vehicle lights have on dark skies?
I'll go ahead and take that one.
Thank you, Peter.
So generally, vehicle traffic is minimum at nighttime, right? So it peaks around rush hour and then tapers off significantly from there. So light pollution from vehicles is not a major component at nighttime from light pollution. It's the lights that are on 24/7. I did want to address something a little bit about professors being psyched and why I should care about astronomy. I get it. You might think that astronomy has nothing to do with your lives, but if you've ever taken a selfie, you can thank astronomers for that. Back in the 1960s, there were scientists at Bell Labs trying to invent a new kind of memory, and they accidentally created a type of memory chip that was sensitive to light. And astronomers said, hey, I could really use that. I'm trying to measure the brightnesses of things. So within 10 years, the first digital cameras were put on telescopes in the 1970s. And these cost millions of dollars, invested by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense. The military was also interested in the application too. And over time, these cameras had more and more pixels, were cheaper to manufacture. And another 20 years later, after decades of investment in just fundamental science that you may not think touches your everyday lives, these digital cameras became cheap enough to put in high-end consumer cameras. And the rest is history. The idea of a selfie has completely transformed our society over the past 20 years. It's important to remember that sometimes investing in the basic sciences can have impact on your society decades later in ways you couldn't have imagined. As another great example of that, astronomy is one of the easiest sciences to engage children in. As Vint Cerf, the founder of the internet, said, there are two things that little boys care about: dinosaurs and space. And that was a little bit, gendered, of course, but in general, children look up and see the moon and they wonder about it. And they wonder, what is that in the sky? And maybe some of us have lost that sense of childhood wonder, especially in the urban light polluting environments that we live in today. But astronomy is definitely a science that we engage children in, Girl Scout troops, Cub Scout troops, and bringing them to observatories. They're not going to drive 4 hours to West Virginia when they have school the next morning. So if you want to locate them somewhere further out in a dark sky location, it's akin to putting a store in the middle of a forest. No one's going to show up. So you have to put it where the people are. And Great Falls, in terms of the greater DC area, is already one of the darkest areas in the DC region. And so being able to engage with children and inspire the next generation of STEM professionals in our community is going to have impacts in our economy for decades to come.
Thank you, Peter. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And I think I just add that, when I showed those pictures, we're actually dealing with the kids. That's really the central thing. We're not just talking astronomy or things. We're talking about educating the population, and that's how we're giving back. So that's what the observatory is about, and why we're probably not, going to Riverbend or something, because like you said, that's where the stuff is. And that's where the people are.
I'd also add, to move an observatory like that, they said, why can't you just pick up your telescopes and move them? I could say that observatory probably cost well over $500,000 to construct. So if someone from the area wants to donate $500,000 to build another observatory, we'll gladly accept that donation to build another observatory. And I know we've had in previous sessions some discussions of why, besides astronomy, you should care about dark skies. We didn't really go over those today, but things like being able to sleep at night, right? I mean, speaking of cell phones again, all these cell phones now, modern cell phones, are equipped with dark time and nighttime mode to turn down the amount of blue light, because it's been shown that can have negative impacts on your health. So in some sense, you can see positive health benefits. And there are many other natural effects in wildlife and plants that rely on dark skies.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to consolidate. We have a couple of comments that concur that parks increase property values. We have a link to, or a mention of, a couple of articles that are resources for property values. And then we have a comment that says that they can see that, but this is not what's being proposed, but an actual restriction on what homeowners can do, which one of the things that we all know is that a restriction on what a homeowner can do is the essence of what a zoning ordinance is. So, Carmen, would you like to give a few words about what exactly the mission and goal of a zoning ordinance is?
Wow. Well, the purpose of the zoning ordinance, it is founded in the police power, and it does protect health, safety, and welfare. And there's actually a purpose, though. I'm going to pull it up for outdoor lighting. All right, here we go. The purpose of the outdoor lighting Regulations in the zoning ordinance are to reduce the impacts of glare, light trespass, and light pollution to promote safety and security and encourage energy conservation. So those are the goals of this body of regulations in the zoning ordinance. And they do admittedly restrict people, what you can do on your property. But it also brings with it the positive benefits as expressed by that purpose statement.
Thank you, Carmen. Okay, we've already had a comment about moving the observatory to another location, but we do have the next answer question or comment that says that could the proposal be scaled back to 1 day a week? And I think that we need a comment from Jeffrey and Tammy, because I think that we have many more activities and daily schedules at the observatory.
Yeah, I can. This year, we're up to the 263rd day. We've had events on 92 of those days. So 34% of the time we have an event going on. So it's not just once a week, it's about 3 times a week or so.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Tammy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. We have a lot more going on, especially the weekends where that's when the scouts can come, because again, school nights and things like that. So not just Fridays, though I would love a lights out Friday. That would be great if folks were willing to do that. But really, we just want to protect the skies from getting worse. As we all know, increased buildings in the area and those sort of things protect what we have.
Thank you, Tammy. Last comment. I understand the purpose of the zoning ordinance, but what is being proposed is a critical and significant change to the current ordinance, which affects hundreds of homeowners who will need to spend significant amounts of money to comply. And I think I'm going to have to go back on my own to my original comment about driving through the area and being quite impressed that the majority of homeowners in the area of this half-mile ordinance are in compliance at this time. There isn't a problem at this time with the locality. We just want to get the education out there and talk about this because of what this preserve would, how it would benefit and protect that observatory as well. I'm going to go back to the attendees at this time. Earlier today, we had one hand go up that went down, probably because of the fact that they were tired from holding their icon up all of this time. So I'm going to ask, first of all, I'm going to go to Carmen, and then I'm going to go to Gary Lanzera. So first, Carmen, go ahead.
Hey, just real quick, I do want to go back to the part of the proposed text that I referred to as your grandfathering. So that's where it would allow your lawfully existing lights to remain, even if they don't comply with the proposed new regulations. And so that means that you really wouldn't have to expend any additional funds, because if you already have lights there, and if they're lawful, now, if you have lights that aren't lawful, then, okay, they shouldn't be there in the first place. But if they are lawful now, and then if the county adopts additional regulations with that kind of a grandfathering provision, you could keep them until you're going to replace them anyway. And then at that point, you can replace them with something that does comply. And compliant fixtures do not necessarily cost more than non-compliant.
I'd like to add an observation, and I know I've seen the comments that have been submitted, and I agree that the neighborhoods that immediately adjoin the observatory area are all fairly mature, stable neighborhoods. However, as anyone who lives in Great Falls would observe, that the newer construction usually is accompanied by significant exterior landscape lighting. So we can consider that this might have some beneficial effect looking forward, and that the fact is that houses that have been there for 43 years have the type of lighting that was popular at the time. But tastes have changed radically, and we can see the community tastes of this area seem to favor a lot more lighting of facades and exteriors, upwards lighting of trees and so on. So let's think about the future. That's just my observation. I think
Thank
Gary
you.
has a
Yes.
hand up.
And we're going to go to Gary, and then we're going to go to Bill Canis. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, can you hear me now, Jennifer?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you to the Great Falls Citizens Association for holding a meeting, for Supervisor Faust and the Park Authority, everyone who's, and also for providing that information that you gave to us in advance. I can't help but note the comment about this. I guess 7,500 people someone mentioned have been coming to the to the site. And participating in a number of the programs. And in fact, it sounds like this year is a record year. And even if some of those people were repeat customers, obviously came more than once attended. Nevertheless, congratulations to the Park Authority. And imagine that all that happened without imposing the lighting restriction on the 521 properties. We are having wonderful turnout, and we have not imposed any additional lighting restrictions. So why then should we be compelled to now have new lighting restrictions, imposing them on our citizens? Because it would make things better. It would make things more and better for some group. But when should the government be imposing restrictions on its own citizens just to make things more and better for some particular group, or more and better for healthcare, for affordable housing? These can be compelling reasons for the government to get involved. But darker skies for a small group can look deeper into the sky is hardly a compelling reason for the government to be imposing more restrictions on its citizens. You would think someone was joking actually about this, imposing these kind of restrictions. But the dark sky enthusiasts are not joking. Here we are setting up restrictions so that a few people can come on at a certain number of times a month, weather permitting, to look into the sky, while residents have to live with these lighting restrictions 365 days a year. Lighting restrictions, which can, even taking into consideration the police officer's comments, can be jeopardizing their safety. And this is only the beginning. Once they start increasing the requirements, as now proposed, it will not stop. Be sure they will be back again to eliminate more and more exceptions. And as to the minority in the survey who want to further limit the lighting proposal, they can go ahead and do it. Nothing is stopping you from cutting back on your lighting, but don't go imposing it on others who don't agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Let's see. I think, Bill, did you have your hand up? Bill Canis?
I think Tammy wanted to respond to that.
Okay, go ahead, Tammy, and then Bill.
Thanks. So I think it's important, representing the Park Authority, is not that there is a provision, as Carmen had said multiple times, that lawfully existing fixtures can remain, and we would be happy with that. We're trying to protect the future skies. So like I said, the skies are okay, and we're getting great, people to show up. But what happens if we don't have these in place and people start adding more and more and more and more lights that aren't compliant? Then we lose this, right? This is something we're just trying to protect. So, we're not asking folks to necessarily change all their lighting. We just don't want it to get worse. We're trying to put protections in for the future. So, there's lots of ways that this ordinance can come out. And so it's important that you voice your opinion, because there are a range of options. And so it's important that we consider them, even if it's just protection of existing lighting and not getting worse.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that earlier today we had one panelist or one attendee that raised their hand and then took it down. I'm going to call your name right now. Jeff Grosvenor, I think I saw your hand go up. You are allowed to unmute if you would like to ask a question.
That was just a mistake.
Okay.
My
Thank you.
mouse just strayed over the thing and I touched it. These Apple mice, you breathe on them and they click.
Okay. Well, always good to hear from you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. I have one observation and two questions. One, apropos of Gary Lanzera's question, that I've noticed, I've lived here for 22 years, and I've noticed that in the last few years along Georgetown Pike, as you drive between Great Falls and McLean, that increasingly, as Peter Falcone mentioned, new homes are being built with multiple piers in front of their house and lights on every one. And this is dramatically changing the whole character of Georgetown Pike from the type of semi-rural road that we enjoy into blinding lights at different places where homeowners feel that every 5 feet of their property needs to be bathed in light in the same way Tyson's Corner is. This is not an attractive future for our community. And I believe what Tammy said is that we need to plan for the future, because unfortunately we see, not in existing neighborhoods, but in newer construction, a penchant to light up every inch of their property. Here are my two questions. First of all, we don't have many streetlights in Great Falls, but I'm curious to know if there are any streetlights in the vicinity of the half-mile radius, and if so, what is the impact of their lighting on this? Because those lights, of course, burn all night long. And my second question is something that Carmen may have touched on, but I don't believe that there's going to be a new police force impaneled to go out and measure light violations at night. Could you say something, perhaps you already said it and I didn't register with me, but could you say something to the neighbors about how these new regulations would in fact be enforced?
Sure. The zoning ordinance is, all of it is enforced on a complaint basis. We have the Department of Code Compliance, and you can submit your complaints in various ways. You can call them, you can submit it online and so forth. And then they will come out and they will investigate, and they can go out during the day very often and observe, what type of fixture. They can talk to the homeowner and get information about the lumens and so forth. So they are able to go out and investigate, but like I said, it's a complaint basis, so it would be based on that.
So if no individual files a complaint about the person who said they had 3 amber lights on their stairway, nothing's going to happen to that individual.
That's correct.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you,
And
Bill.
Can
Go
anyone
ahead.
answer my question about streetlights? Perhaps Peter Plavchin can answer, or Jeff Kretsch.
Actually, if you don't mind, before Carmen starts, I'll make a comment. I believe that Carmen will speak to this as well, that street lights are exempt from the outdoor lighting ordinance. And in the area immediately surrounding the observatory, I would say that there are probably about a half a dozen that I know exist, but most of them are being retrofitted to dark sky compliant fixtures. And we can certainly take an inventory of those so that we can ensure that they are compliant with the VDOT regulations for street lighting. Did I get that right, Carmen?
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
So public right-of-way is not subject to the zoning ordinance. If you had a private street and it had lights on it, those would still be subject to the zoning ordinance.
So does that, because the Commonwealth's authorization does not permit that? Or is that because the way you've drafted the ordinance so far doesn't cover street lights?
Yeah, the enabling authority for the zoning does not apply to the any of the public properties like owned by the state. So that's why, for instance, we can't enact regulations on the George Mason campus as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I could add one thing.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, within the immediate area, I think John Fowles helped us actually not have streetlights right on the road in front of the observatory, close to there. So I believe he made an effort to actually prevent those from being put in.
I think you're right,
I mean,
John.
that's accurate. As long as you can demonstrate to VDOT that you're not going to create a safety issue, they'll work with you. But it's, they're a safety first organization. But we've had good luck working with them, demonstrating that maybe their requirements were a little excessive in that general vicinity.
Okay, I have one more hand raised before we wrap things up for this evening. I have Carla. Go ahead, Carla. You have the ability to speak. Are you having problem? Let's see if we can.
Is that better? Hello?
There you go. There
Okay.
you go.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you all. I know this is a lot of time and effort and expertise that's been expended on this. I do live within the half mile of that designated area of the observatory. I'd like to comment on a couple points that Carmen made when she was quoting from the principle. That's not the word you use, but the principle of the zoning ordinances. And you said it was to protect the health, safety, and welfare. And then more specifically, you said it had 2 main points, to promote safety and security, and secondly, to decrease energy use. The proposal to limit the lighting within that half mile does not meet either of those points, other than to an extent it might decrease a little bit of the energy. Also, I found Officer Defoe's presentation interesting, and there were a couple of points that she did not say, but that she presented in writing. And one of them was full cutoff fixtures may help with owner's safety, but not in deterring people who should not be there. So I fully understand the benefit of the cutoff light for safety. But as a homeowner in this half-mile radius, the safety of my property and of the people on my property are major concerns of mine. Secondarily, in another part of Officer Defoe's presentation, I believe she said, correct me if I'm wrong, regarding lumens, 1,500 to 3,000 are needed to light up the average living room, which I know sounds like a lot, but I'm pretty sure that's what she said. And yet, in the material of August 31 of this year, zoning ordinance amendment outdoor lighting that you sent us, which is very helpful, a lot of information, they talk about a cutoff of 1,500 lumens. So 1,500 lumens might be a little bit low, but overall, in isolation, I think the goals of this are commendable in isolation. However, I do believe, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of things that GFCA has done. Bill, you've lived here for a long time. I've actually lived here for over 30 years, so you and I both decades, a lot of people here, decades. And to that point, I don't believe it's right to infringe on the right of certain property owners for a number of other people who don't even live necessarily in this area. I appreciate what was said about encouraging interest in science and that kind of thing. I do believe, with all due respect, that this is an example of government overreach. And I really know that you will listen to all the points of view and understand that the rights of your citizens take precedence over being admitted or accepted as as part of the International Dark Sky Association. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Carla. Let's see. I think we had one question that popped up that asked about if this applied to commercial lighting or commercial properties. We don't have any commercial properties within that 1/2 mile radius of the observatory. And then just one observation that I wanted to touch upon. I found recently a wonderful tool online with the Fairfax County website, which actually there's a map that will you can plug in an address and it will take you to the language of the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan for this area is written to maintain large lot zoning, but one of the things that it speaks about is to make sure that this area remains a dark sky friendly community. So another aspect of the paperwork and ordinances and language that the Board of Supervisors and staff use when they take a look at zoning and projects as they come into the offices to make recommendations. So they're going to read that comprehensive plan. They're going to consult and see what is appropriate for all of the areas here. We're very close to 9 p.m. and I'd like to say thank you and ask, one more question just popped up. Can someone respond to Carla? She made some excellent points, in particular how the goals of this are not being achieved. I think that we're going to leave that as a personal commentary that Carla is certainly allowed to have, and that what I personally, as a member of the GFCA and chair of the Land Use and Zoning Committee, I use my opportunity and my voice whenever possible to go and speak at public hearings, and that's what I urge everyone on this call to do, to express their voice, and that is how they can speak to the supervisor's office. They can speak to the planning commission. I did want to say that unfortunately, Planning Commissioner Ulfelder had some problems connecting this evening. He wanted to attend, but he was unable to join the meeting. So we will get him the paperwork and make sure he is aware of this meeting and he can take a look at it online. So with that, I give the floor back to Bill Canis.
Can I hop in just for a second and promote what my service is?
Sure.
So we do come look at, if you would like a home security survey, and that's again, like I said, lighting is not the only answer. It is a tool, but it is not the only answer. So there are things, every property has something unique about it that we can enhance the security and safety of the people using the space. and making it the legitimate user friendly, not the illegitimate user friendly. So yes, sure, lights can help you see things, and then lights can help you see things. But my email address is on the slides. Feel free to reach out, and we can get either have a conversation or have someone come out and look at your safety and security that you already have in place.
Thank you, Katie. And one last thing, Bill, before you close us out, just a reminder on the homepage, which is available to everyone, whether you are a member of the GFCA or not. The homepage will have a link to the video for this presentation, and you can email environment@gfca.org and zoning@gfca.org, and we will make sure that you get a copy of all of the paperwork that was presented this evening. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you very much to one and all who presented this evening. Special thanks to Supervisor Faust for spending this evening. He probably doesn't have many evenings of his own. When you're a supervisor, you're always on the road doing something, I suppose. So I want to thank everyone from GFCA, for Katie Defoe, Amy, Carmen, Peter Plavchin. Thank you for coming from GMU, and I believe some of your students may have participated, to Jennifer and Peter for organizing this, for Jeffrey Kretsch. Thank everyone for a very enlightening discussion tonight. This is a lively topic in the community, and as was mentioned by several speakers this evening, this is not a finished proposal by any means. The Fairfax County Planning Commission will hold a hearing. Residents will be able to comment on that. I know from GFCA's work with the Planning Commission over the years that proposals can often be modified at that stage. They can also be changed by the Board of Supervisors when it gets to that stage. So the purpose of GFCA's holding this community meeting tonight was to provide the widest net of information possible to the community. And we had some 40 plus individuals online tonight. It would have been nice if we'd had 140, but nonetheless, 40 is a very respectable number. For those of you that have raised these questions, certainly talk to your neighbors, share the link. Hopefully some neighbors will also be interested in hearing both sides of this before they make their own decision. And Jennifer Falcone has indicated those resources will be available to you. Katie Defoe and Carmen have also talked about visiting properties to evaluate. If you have a question, they want to be available to answer any questions you have. So we're trying to provide all of these resources. GFCA does not make any decisions. We're just a voluntary organizations. It's the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors that will make those decisions. And we try to provide all of the resources so residents, regardless of what their views are, can weigh in and make their voice heard. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating tonight in this process.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks, Bill. Good night, everybody.